Hello and welcome. We're going to actually be sketching out a buoy. This could be something like a takedown buoy, or it doesn't necessarily have to be a takedown, but I'm going to draw it in that kind of style. I'm also kind of thinking we should do something maybe with an S-guard. I think would look really nice. I want it to have a pommel, of course, a handle, and then a blade. As far as the blade goes, have some different decisions to make, different clip designs and everything to go with. So let's just jump right in here. Got a little bit of a general idea. Let's start with a line. I like to base my whole knife off of a line. This will be the spine of the blade, and it'll kind of act as a straight line to build everything off of. So I want a straight line. This is going to represent the spine of the blade. And we want a 10-inch blade, so I'm going to give myself a little mark here at the 10-inch mark. And I'm going to continue that line on out for the handle. This will come into play later when we go to do the handle. And then for now, I'm just going to give myself a mark at the 15-inch mark. So that'll give us a 10-inch blade and a 5-inch handle. We might need to shorten or lengthen that handle up a little bit, but 5 inches should be a really good starting place for a 10-inch bladed buoy. So I'll just give myself a little number there, so I remember that's 5 inches and not like 4.5 or something else. The next thing I need to do, tongue got stuck. The next thing I need to do is figure out how wide the blade's going to be. And that can vary greatly. I've seen some really cool buoys that had absolutely ridiculously wide blades, like 3.5, 4 inches tall. But I'm going to make something that's kind of what I consider to be classically inspired with Kyle Royer twist, I guess. So it's not going to have any really crazy proportions. Let me think about this for a second. And while I'm doing that, I have a coffee break. Um, 10-inch blade. For a 10-inch blade, I would probably shoot for 1 3/4 inches to like 2 inches, somewhere in that range. And since I can't decide, I'm just going to shoot for the middle of that. So 1 7/8 inches. We'll try that. And since I'm doing a sketch, if it looks too skinny or too fat, I can always come back and change things up. Give myself a straight line. That's looking pretty good. So now I kind of like to work from the tip back. I do this on most knife sketches that I'm working on. I just kind of design things from the tip and work my way back to the pommel nut. So for the tip on a buoy, we need to locate where that tip is going to be in between these two parallel lines. This top line represents the spine of the blade. This bottom one represents the edge of the blade. So where's the tip going to be in relation to that? It can change a lot depending on what kind of knife you're doing, but normally on these kind of straight bladed standard buoy blade shapes, my tip is going to come out somewhere in the 2/3 to 3/4 way up mark. And I'm talking up from the blade edge. So somewhere in the 2/3 to 3/4. And I don't really measure it normally. I just kind of eyeball it. So I'm going to say that maybe about right here. I would say that's about 2/3 the way between the two lines if you're measuring up from the bottom. And you can change up your tip, and that really has a lot of impact on your blade. Moving the tip up or down, even a 1/16 of an inch can sometimes dramatically change kind of the feel of the blade. It can change up how the blade edge curves up towards the tip. It can kind of change how skinny the tip looks or how chunky the tip looks and how your clip meets up with it. This should be a good starting place though. If you're doing something like a recurve or something like that, the tip might end up way down here. Or if you're doing a buoy that kind of sweeps up, then the tip might end up higher. This should be a good starting place. The next thing I want to do is just rotate my paper here a little bit. And I think I want to try to draw in the blade edge and have that meet up with the tip of the blade. So I'm just coming back here a couple inches. I'm going to draw a line up to the tip there. This will definitely need fine-tuned a lot. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the rest of this line. So it's just kind of in the way now. Rest of that straight line there. Okay, so right off the bat, I'm seeing that this line looks way too straight through here. Then there's like a lot of curve right there, and then it's kind of straight again. So I need to smooth that out a little bit. Kind of blend that in. I want a nice smooth flowing line. I don't want a harsh place where the angle changes. Starting to go off the wrong direction there a little bit. That's looking pretty good. Another thing that can affect how your blade looks, another thing that can affect how your blade looks is how far back this edge curves. If you bring that edge all the way back to here and have it start curving up towards the tip, it's going to make the tip look a lot skinnier. If I just quickly draw that in here to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So I brought that all the way back to here and have it start coming up towards the tip. So if you did that, your tip's going to look really skinny. And the opposite can happen as well. If you bring it out here further and then have it come up, you're going to end up with a really, really chunky, stout tip. So you can play around with those relations a little bit to kind of find out what looks best, but don't worry about it too much at this stage. You can fine tune this tip shape more after we get the clip drawn in, because the clip might affect where this tip's going to come out, and it might affect how this looks, and you need to change that kind of based on how the clip looks. So I wouldn't worry about getting this perfect right now. I want to move on to the clip, and I mentioned I want to do kind of a Sheffield style clip. So what I'm going to do is just start out with a straight line. So our blade comes back to here. Kind of need to visualize where I want the clip to stop. And right now I'm just trying to draw in the curved part of the clip. I'm not worried about the part that's following the spine yet. So normally I like these to be pretty long, but not as long as if I were doing just a straight curved clip by itself. This is going to be the Sheffield style one. So it's going to be kind of what I consider to be medium length. So somewhere, if this was my whole blade from here to here, I would consider a medium length clip to kind of fall in the middle somewhere, I guess medium. And then a short clip would be maybe, I don't know, if it only went to there. And then a long clip would be anything from like here back, I would say. So we'll just try that, see how it looks. This is going to be curved, but it's easier to draw a nice smooth curved line if I have a straight line as a guide. So I'm going to start with a straight line here. And I don't know, I'm already feeling like something looks a little bit off, but we'll keep going with this so far. So next I want to curve this line a little bit. And I'm using the straight line as a guide. So I'm going to have the clip end here and here, but I want it to drop down in the middle. Let's say about a 1/4 inch. So give myself a little reference line there. It's about a 1/4 inch down. Then I'm just going to hand draw in this curve. Something's looking kind of off. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that straight line. Pretty much done with it. Yeah, it's definitely off. I definitely need to make this clip longer. It's looking too short and chunky. I can already tell that it's just not going to be what I'm wanting. So I'm going to bring this back. Let's just try moving it back a 1/2 inch and see how that changes it. Give myself that straight line there again. And then come in and redraw this, have it drop down about that much. This curve that I'm drawing for the clip, it's not going to be perfect. I can come back in and fine tune a little bit later, but it's never going to be like absolutely perfect. It just needs to be close. Later on, when you're grinding your steel, it's easier to get the steel to kind of have a nice smooth flowing curve on it while you're grinding it. You don't need to worry about the every little bump and curve on the clip as you're drawing it. It just needs to be close enough that it really gives you a good idea of how the knife's going to look and the right proportions and dimensions and stuff. If it's so bad that you can't really tell how the knife's going to look, then that might not be very useful. Okay, I'm already liking this a lot more. I might have made it drop down a little too much. Maybe. It's kind of hard to tell, so we'll go ahead and continue drawing the clip in. So that's just like the spine view of the clip. Next, I need to draw in the actual clip grind. So on a clip this size, I would say that back here at the widest, I would probably have the clip drop anywhere from 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch, somewhere in that range. So I'm going to go for maybe in between 3/16 and 1/4. And then this line is going to follow the spine of the clip here, except it's going to slowly taper off as we get down to the tip. I'm just going to kind of try to draw it how I think it would look on a real knife. It's a little bit hard to accurately draw it the same as a knife would be. But as you make more and more knives, you kind of get a feel for how this really tapers in real life. That might be a little on the big side. Let me skinny that down just a little bit. Probably shooting more towards 3/16 of an inch now. Yeah, that's looking better. Okay, I'm liking that. I still think this could have too much curve in it, but I'm going to keep going with it for now. So now I want, since we're doing a Sheffield style clip, I want this clip to follow the spine of the blade a little bit, maybe come back to about here somewhere and then have an abrupt stop. So to do that, I'm just going to use my ruler and make it parallel to the spine of the blade. Go back maybe that far. That looks pretty good. And then I'm going to have a really abrupt stop here. Maybe a little bit of a curve. Actually, I think it wouldn't hurt. I think that would be good, but I think it wouldn't hurt to have it come back a little bit further. I think a little bit further. Slim things down a little bit. So maybe I only brought that back, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch further or so. This radius I'm drawing in right here, I know I'm going to get that radius the way I'm going to grind this clip in. I actually like to use my plunge grinding attachment that I use for my regular plunges. I use that on this style of clip too, and it'll give me a beautiful little radius that kind of looks similar to what I've drawn in here. It might be a little bit sharper than what I drew in, but it's very similar to that. I'm also not sure if my line was real parallel. If you wanted to be a little more accurate, you could measure off the spine up here and measure back here and then draw between the two. I think my line is headed towards the spine a little bit here, towards the front. I'm just going to kind of hand draw over that so it has the same feel as the rest of the clip, because we had that really clean line there, and it kind of throws me off if I see a really clean line and then you have this kind of rough hand drawn line in. So I like to kind of hand draw over it so it all matches a little bit. Okay, I'm liking this better. This was looking a, but after I added this Sheffield clip area in, it did help a little bit, and I'm actually liking it more now. With that being said, though, I think I still do want to get rid of a little bit of this curve here on the clip. So to do that, I'm just going to come in and draw away a little bit of that curve. Make it a little straighter. I only went a little bit more than a pencil thickness there. You can just come back in and erase little bits of pencil that you don't want. Sometimes I think of it like, I don't know if you've ever seen anybody carving on, like making one of those really cool wood bear carvings out of log, just sitting there hacking away at it with a chainsaw. Sometimes I think of sketching in the same way. It's like you've got this paper and you just cover it with pencil and then you erase everything that doesn't look like a knife. Need to change this a little bit. It got a little too big when I moved that around. So I'm going to skinny this up just a little bit more, straighten it up to match our new slightly straighter clip. I know this change I'm making is very minor because I only straighten the clip up by like a pencil thickness or two. I think I'm liking that pretty well. Something though still seems a tiny bit off. You know what I think it is? I think the tip could be raised. I'm going to try raising the tip a little bit. And this is just how it goes a lot of times when I draw knives like this. I'll just see little things that just don't look quite how I want them to and just move them ever so slightly. Because I have a vision in my, kind of a little bit of a vision in my head of how I want this blade to look. I want it to look sleek and long and kind of classic and elegant. And just moving this tip up might help me get it looking a little bit more sleek. I'm only going to move the tip up, let's say, about 1/16 of an inch, maybe a little bit more. Give myself a straight line again. Try to not have it drop down too much, just a little bit. This is probably the hardest part of drawing a clip, is trying to draw in these long, slightly curved areas. I also think when it comes to making a knife, doing the clip is actually one of the hardest parts of grinding the blade and stuff too. It's not terrible to do, but you're working with such a small bevel that when you're grinding and hand sanding and stuff, it's very easy to round things over and get things not looking how you want. So I'm going to try and see how that looks. Add in this bottom part here, the grind itself. Bring this back all the way, clean this up a little bit. A little on the rough side, but okay, that's starting to look good. That's starting to look more how I envisioned it. Yeah. I think I'm liking that a lot. Hey, Josh, you want to grab the sketches? Oh. I have a couple other sketches I'm going to show you real quick as well. I think something that needs to be changed right here, I think this needs to come back a little bit further. It looks a little too chunky out here. So that's why I mentioned to wait until the clip was kind of drawn in before you mess with this this edge too much, because the clip will kind of help you determine how the tip area looks, and it'll inform you on what you need to do. Do you need to make the tip look a little bulkier? You need to thin it down? Okay. I think that's starting to look pretty good. Part of me almost thinks that I need to make this curved part of the clip come back further, but I'm not going to touch it for now. We can always come back and adjust that after we've got a handle or something on there. I just want to get it close for now, and you can come back and make little adjustments and stuff. I actually like to think of my sketch drawing in 4 stages, really. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. Stage 1 is getting the blade drawn out. Stage 2 is focusing on the guard and like the front spacer assembly. Stage 3 is where I finish up the rest of the handle and pommel and stuff like that. And then stage 4 is where I like to add embellishments like gold inlay, maybe a little bit of file work, come back in, tweak things, make this clip longer or shorter if I want to, move that tip up or down, adjustments and embellishments on stage 4. I need a little coffee break. And when I say I'm taking a coffee break, I'm not like guzzling coffee. I'm taking a little sip. So it's not like I'm drinking a ton. Also water. So if you're finding this sketch drawing interesting or helpful so far, then I have got something you definitely want to check out. It's called learnsketchmaking.com, and it goes through 4 different knives. We've got one on an EDC, a Western chef's knife, a recurve fighter, and a Quillian dagger. And here's the actual ones from the course that I drew out. This EDC was supposed to be clean and simple and something really useful with a small blade, easy enough that you could carry it simply. We've got the Western chef's knife we drew in the course. Went through all the little details and aspects of how I like to draw a Western chef's knife. And we made a cardboard cutout to make sure that it was going to perform properly, make sure that this curve was proper, make sure that there was enough knuckle clearance and all that stuff, made sure it was all good. You especially want that with something like a chef's knife. You don't want to have a chef's knife that doesn't perform right. Of course, you don't want any knife not to perform right, but it's especially important on a chef's knife. Here's the recurve fighter. I went through every step of showing you how I go about drawing something like this. This has got a massive 12-inch blade. I will say recurve fighters, these buggers are trickier to draw for me than something with a straight blade, mostly just because everything's so curvy, but I show you exactly how I got to this finished stage here. I think this would make a really, really cool fighter. And then in the course, I also go over how to draw a Quillian dagger. This is the one I showed right here. This is a really cool one. I tried to draw it with a Mastersmith test in mind. So I made it with a 10-inch. I made it with a 10-inch blade. We've got a good Quillian guard here, a fluted handle. You can't see the wire. I normally don't draw the wire in there, but it's all got fluting, and you just add wire down at the bottom. Cool ornate pommel. Everything going on, even a little bit of file work. Check out that course if you're interested. I've got many hours of going through each one of these sketches in detail. I also talk about inspiration and how I get inspired to even draw different knives to begin with. And with the membership at Learn Sketchmaking, you're also going to get access to every single one of our other courses, all of them that we've done. And we've got the Takedown Bowie, the Beginner Bladesmith, the Mosaic Damascus Fighter, the Catalyst Dagger, the Enigma Folder, the Damascene Hunter, and more. And I go through how to build knives from start to finish, every little detail. You're just right out there with me in the shop as I do those. So not only are you going to be getting Learn Sketchmaking, but all the other courses as well. Let's get back to this. I kind of think the blade might look a little bit on the fat side. But I think I'm going to go with it for now. Let's just start drawing in the ricasso. So the ricasso length on a knife this size, for my style ricasso that I do, I normally like it to be right around a 1/2 inch to 5/8 inch. Of course, you can change that up a lot. It doesn't have to be that number specifically. I've got a square here. I'm just going to pop this square on. Give myself a nice square line to go by. That's going to be our plunge. And then I need another square line where the guard's going to fit up here. So something like that. The next thing we need to decide on is the ricasso height. And for a 10-inch bladed Bowie, I normally like the ricasso height to be anywhere from about 1 inch to 1 1/8 inches. But I think I'm going to shoot for 1 inch. Normally is a pretty good standard on a 10-inch blade. So do a 1-inch tall ricasso. Yep. This immediately, once I drew in this line, I'm immediately feeling like this blade is a little too wide. And I feel like that's what keeps holding up me feeling like the blade is done. Getting that ricasso height in there kind of pointed out how wide the blade is here. So that 1 7/8 might have been a little on the wide side. Let's continue drawing the ricasso though. And we'll go ahead and do the little choil area. I'm going to draw the choil in like I normally like to do them on pretty much most of my knives. So the choil is just going to drop straight down, and it's going to curve towards the edge. Just a little bit, just like that. We can go ahead and draw in how this plunge would look on a real knife too. So on my knives, I like to have the plunge come pretty much straight up, and then there's a little radius right at the end. So I'll go ahead and draw in that radius, and then that line kind of tapers out and meets the spine, something like this. I think that looks good for. Go ahead and darken up this spine line a little bit. There's another variation on this that I want to point out you could do. It'd be a little bit of extra work. And if this were a Damascus blade, it would kind of disappear a little bit when you etch the Damascus. But what you could do is have your grind line actually stop at the same height as the clip's going to be ground in. And then have the grind line continue straight on to the clip. And that's a really cool look too. Something like that. You might ask why this is more work. And really it's more work because you have a nice crisp line right here that you've got to preserve, and you've got to keep it straight, and you've got to keep it in line with that clip. And most of the time when I'm grinding in the blade, the clip isn't ground in yet. So you've got to not only know how far down you want to grind your clip, but you also have to make sure that later on when you go to grind your clip that you stop right where it meets this line. It would have the opposite effect of looking good if your clip came down beyond. Like let's say it came down to like there. And now this line, this nice crisp line, didn't line up with the clip. That would actually take away from the knife instead of adding to it, making it look cool. It's also going to be pretty difficult to keep this line crispy. The reason being, you're working on these big wide bevels. And then you have this slight angle change where you've got a little flat spot here. And that slight angle change is actually going to make it so this line doesn't have much of an angle. It's going to be very, very gentle. If it was a more aggressive angle, then it'd be easier to keep that point sharp. But since it's so passive, it's going to be very difficult to keep that sharp. You're going to have to be very careful when you're hand sanding and stuff to not round that over. And then really in Damascus, when you go to etch it and everything, it kind of has a tendency of making any of your sharp lines that you preserved, it kind of makes them disappear a little bit. And it's actually really sad that happens a lot of times with Damascus, because you might spend tons and tons of time keeping that super, super crisp, but then by the time you're done etching it and everything, and it's just kind of gets lost in the pattern. So I probably wouldn't spend the extra work on this kind of a line on a Damascus blade, but maybe I would consider it on a stainless steel or carbon steel, like mono steel type blade. There it might have a chance to shine a little bit more. Something else you could do to help that make that pop is do a different finish, either on the blade bevel or on this ricasso area here. You could do a finer grit finish or coarser up here, or like mirror polish this part and have a hand sanded satin finish on this, or lots of different options you could do to make that pop. You could do texture up here on this, all sorts of different things. But for now, I think I'm going to just put that back to how I had it, because most of my blades are Damascus, and most of the time I'm going to be doing this grind that goes all the way up to the spine. I can tell that this blade just looks thicker than I want it after drawing in that ricasso. So before I go and make the guard extra wide to compensate for this wide blade, I think I want to go ahead and skinny the blade down just a little bit. I don't think we'll have to adjust too much. If we do, I'll try to be quick about it here. I'm just going to skinny it down a little bit, take some away from this edge. So it was 1 7/8 of an inch. I'm going to try 1 3/4. We'll try that, see if that works. It's just not looking how I want it to yet. And you could continue drawing the handle and the guard, but if I see this wide blade, I might have a tendency of going in there and trying to make the guard extra wide to compensate for it. And then if I went and skinnied the blade down later, then the guard might start looking too wide. So to a certain degree, you can move on, but sometimes you might need to skinny the blade up or make it fatter before you move on. It's kind of situational. Something else that really helps make things, like, it helps me know if I really like something or not, is a lot of times I'll finish a sketch and then I'll let it sit there overnight. And then the next day when I look at it with fresh eyes, I'll either really be in love with it or something will stand out really obvious that I need to change. Sometimes something that you couldn't see in the moment will really stand out the next day. Yeah, that's definitely a lot better. It was too wide for sure. I think 1 3/4 is looking better. So I shaved 1/8 of an inch off the height. And now it's got a little bit more of a long, slender feel to it compared to what it was before. It could be even a little bit skinnier. I got to be careful though. If I skinny it down too much, what we're going to have to do is raise this tip up. In fact, I still might have to do it because I'm just taking height off the edge, which makes that tip come closer and closer to the center. So the more you take off the edge, at some point you're going to have to move that tip up to kind of compensate for that. Also, this curve, I can't seem to get this curve right. I keep coming back to it. It's a little too aggressive. Okay, that looks good. I brought it back a little further. It was kind of starting right here, brought it back to like there. All right, let's move on to stage 2. I'm happy with the blade, so let's go ahead and do the guard and the front spacer assembly. I'm going to take a little drink of water, and I'm going to ask Josh to get me a couple things that I forgot to get out. What? One is the trace pad, and the other is a paper towel for my nose. I have some allergies right now from summertime stuff. The trace pad should be in the storage room. Okay, for the guard, I know I want to do an S guard. I'm getting distracted on a line. Also, is that square? That actually, something doesn't look square to me. Yeah, it's tilting forward. I don't know how that happened. I used my square, but somehow this line is tilting forward ever so slightly, and it's bugging me every time I look at it. So let me see if I can untilt it a little bit here without it tilting back the other way. Okay, that looks better. I also want to mention that a lot of times on my buoys and stuff, I like this choil, this grind line right here. I like it to be almost perfectly square with the spine of the blade. And that's when we're talking about like a straight blade like this. Might be different on a recurve or something. And I like the guard to also be almost square. If anything, I will tilt them forward, but I'll do it such a little amount. I don't draw it in or anything. I'll just do it when I'm making the knife. If I do it though, I'll do it such a small amount. It'll only be a few thousandths of an inch. And I sometimes do that just because I don't want the guard or the plunge line here to have the illusion of tipping backwards. If it ever looks like they're tipping backwards on one of these kinds of knives, it can make the knife look like it's moving slower, make things really slow down and just not flow as well. If it's tipped forward only a couple thousandths of an inch, it should help it keep from looking like it's accidentally tipping backwards. But I'm pretty much just going for mostly square. A lot of times on really cool fighters and stuff, you'll see guards tipped way forwards. That's because a lot of times it'll make the blade look like it's in motion. It'll make things look like they're moving and quick, sleek, and fast. And it's only in rare scenarios can you have like the guard tipping backwards or the plunge tipping backwards. So I've got a trace pad here. You don't have to have this. I've used like a flashlight behind a piece of glass before many times, or even my phone. Just stick my phone, turn on the screen, turn the brightness all the way up, stick my phone over there and use it to like trace through. We're going to use that in a minute for the guard. For now, I want to go ahead and just draw the top part. Actually, we're probably not even going to need that. I got so sidetracked on that. I use the trace pad for symmetrical guards, like the dagger. This dagger right here, I like to draw one side, put it on this pad, trace over it with another piece of paper, and then I just flip that piece of paper over, put it under the first piece, and then I can have a perfectly symmetrical guard on the other side. It's an amazing trick that really helps me draw, because it's really hard to draw a symmetrical guard the same on both sides. That can help you do it real quickly just using your phone or using something like this, like $20 or $30 lighted pad. I don't know why I was thinking I needed that for this. It doesn't really apply for this because this guard isn't going to be symmetrical. It's going to curve forward and it's going to curve back, but we need the top quillion to actually be a little bit smaller than the bottom quillion. If you have the top and the bottom the exact same size, something is probably going to look off. Your eye is going to look at this knife and it's going to be like, something looks wrong. I don't know what it is, but something looks off. And the reason being, that top quillion, if you make it the same size as the bottom, will probably actually look like it's bigger than the bottom one. Because I think what makes that happen is because this edge drops down. The edge drops way down here. The handle's going to end up dropping down. So your eye looks at the knife overall and sees this guard sticking up, and it looks like it's sticking up way too high compared to the bottom because of the blade dropping down and stuff. In fact, just to illustrate that, I might do the tracing method just to show you what I'm talking about, making the top and bottom exactly symmetrical. But to start with, I want to just start drawing this guard. So let's establish a thickness for this guard. Normally on these big S guards, I like to do something that's about 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch thick. I think for this knife, let's go for a little over 3/16. Not quite 1/4, in between 3/16 and 1/4. Let's go with that. 3/16 just seemed a little skinny. Okay, we've got the base of our guard. Let's just start drawing in the top quillion part. So I know I want a real curvy S guard. So I'm going to have it just go up maybe 1/8 of an inch, maybe 1/4, and then it immediately needs to start curving forward. If you have too much of a straight spot here, like if you go up too high, like let's say I went up 3/8 of an inch and then start curving forward, before you know it, this top part is going to get way out of hand and it's going to get really big. So you only want a little bit of a straight spot there. I've done a couple of guards actually where it immediately starts curving, like as soon as that blade stops is where that curve starts happening. These normally take some messing with in order to get just right. That's too much. Something's off. I can't put my finger on it, but something's off there. I think it was too much curve. Let's go a little bit straighter. Okay, let's kind of see how that's looking. I'm going to start drawing in the other side of it. You got to figure out what kind of a tip you want on the guard. There's all sorts of different shapes for guards. Like on this dagger, we've got kind of a crazy shape. This shape's actually kind of inspired by Buster Warinsky. I love his daggers and everything. So he did a similar shape to this, only the shape was done much differently. I just kind of condensed it down into the shape of the tip, but he did kind of the whole guard that shape, and I really liked it. So that's one shape. Lots of different shapes. You can do kind of this. I love this shape. It's not going to look real good when I just draw it in quickly. It takes some refining and stuff. But I love the shape that's just kind of this rounded look. And then it curves around and meets at a point right here. Again, this is rough. It needs to be modified more. You can do kind of these, there's a shape that I really like that's just comes to a point like that. And then it kind of mirrors itself on the other side. Something kind of similar to this. Again, that needs some serious help. Now's the time to start to make a decision on this. I still think that's curving forward too much though. Let's straighten that out a little bit more. Okay, I think that's good. I think for this one, I want to do that first shape that I drew, just this nice, rounded, clean, simple, elegant shape. It looks really good when you do a little gold inlay border or something on it. That's not right. With these guard shapes, I really do find myself kind of carving away at the paper as if it were a block of wood, and I'm trying to carve a bear out of it, slowly trying to remove anything that doesn't look like what I have in my head. Maybe something like that. Okay, that's looking a little better. I think this needs to curve around differently here. Maybe I need to add more curve in. I took all that curve away and now I'm like slowly adding it back. Let's go to right there. So what I did was added a little more curve in and I shortened it up a little bit. It was coming out to here, shortened it up just a tiny bit. See how that looks. Nope, still not liking it. I think I just need to keep drawing it until it looks better. Let's make it go crazy here. Go way over here. I think it needs to be wider. I think that might be part of what I'm looking at here. You see the width right here, it gets a little bit wider, but maybe a little more would help because it's looking too sterile. There's not enough shape happening. So maybe that's the ingredient I'm missing. A little more width. There we go. That's looking better. I think I like that quite a bit. I could keep tweaking this and everything, but I think it's pretty close and give me a good idea for how this knife's going to look. One thing that you could do with a guard like this is really go like Art Deco on it and have it really curve around a lot. This one's already pretty curvy though. So I want to trace this out and show you how this guard would look on the knife if I made the top and bottom symmetrical. And hopefully you'll be able to see that something just looks off, and it'll probably look like this top part is too big if the top and bottom are symmetrical. I'm just going to lay the lighted pad here. Take a piece of paper. Oh, not one with the sketch on it already. Plain piece of paper. Take a drink of water. We've got links in the description too, like for this pad, if you're interested in exactly the one I'm using. This is just a really, really cheap one that I got off Amazon recently because I wanted to try it out. And I actually really like it. I've used my phone and a flashlight under a piece of glass for many years. This is really convenient, just having a nice flat surface that you can turn on and off and having it a larger surface to work with. Oh, apparently my arm touched the off button. Okay, let's trace over this real quickly. And I want to show you what this looks like if you make the guard symmetrical. Probably going to look bad. Oh, I need to quit touching that button with my arm. I think I need to have this pad technically flipped around the other direction. This is the exact process I use, by the way, when I'm trying to draw a symmetrical guard. It works amazing. Then you don't have to come in here and like try to make it look symmetrical by eye. You're going to know that it's symmetrical. Okay, I'm just trying to line it up over those other lines there. Also, sometimes when I'm doing it more, if you want to be a little bit more careful and not have your paper slide around, you can always put a little piece of tape on the edge of the paper. This should be good enough as long as I don't move it too much. Just to show what this looks like symmetrical. I'm going to end up erasing all this. Okay, there we go. I think we're done with that. And there's the guard drawn symmetrically. I'm not going to leave it on long enough for the handle to be drawn, but hopefully now you can kind of see what I was talking about. I think it would become more obvious once you got the handle drawn on there that this bottom quillion is just too small. In fact, let me just continue this line from the bottom of the ricasso. That's kind of where the handle would continue anyway. Just have that kind of come out here and drop down a little bit because that's what the handle's going to do. It's going to be way prettier than that, but just to give you an idea of what it's going to look like with a handle on there, if I go to put my hand in there, I mean, look at this. You can already see that there's not enough room in there for my finger. That guard is going to be hitting my finger. To me, the proportions look way off. Even though this bottom part is the same size as the top, it looks smaller to my eye. I think it's because the edge of the blade drops down, the handle drops down, so it makes this look like it's sticking way up. Definitely don't want to do a symmetrical guard like this. If you did a symmetrical guard, you possibly could. It might look a little bit off, but you need to make this one bigger in order to make this one bigger to give you more room for your finger in there, because there's just flat out not enough room. I know that the knuckle of my finger would probably be hitting on the guard right there, and you definitely don't want that. It's okay if your finger hits up against the guard over here. I mean, it's meant to rest up against that, but you don't want it to like fit in there like a glove and rub on this part. I'm going to erase that. I might use it as a little bit of a guide just to get me started. And what we're going to do, we're going to drop that down further, and we're probably going to bring it back further too. Even though it's not symmetrical, we want it to look like it goes together. We want everything to flow well. You don't want the bottom to be too crazy different than the top. Otherwise, it won't look like it goes with the top portion of the guard. So I'm just going to follow this curve that I've already started, or I've already got left over from the other guard there. I'm going to veer off slightly, maybe right there. I'm going to drop down further and come back a little bit further. Might have been better to do it with this inside curve, actually. So right here, I've dropped down about maybe a little over 1/8 of an inch. That still might be on the tight side. I'm going to keep drawing it. No, actually, no. It's too tight. It's too tight there. Let me drop it down more. This isn't much of a problem. Like getting your finger to fit in there is not too much of a problem if your guard doesn't curve a lot. If your guard's a little bit straighter, it's not too much of an issue. But a real curvy guard like this, it starts to really come into play. Okay, brought it back a little bit further, maybe about 1/4 inch. Dropped it down about 1/4 inch. Kind of stop, take a look at it, see how it's looking. Go ahead and try to draw this tip on here. Apparently drawing this little tip thing on the guard is the hardest part for me. Something else that you're allowed to do, since this guard isn't symmetrical, a lot of times I'll like to let this bottom part be ever so slightly wider. You could probably get by with leaving it the same width as this one, but since it curves back more and it drops down more, it's bigger. It's kind of like the bigger brother. It can just be a little bit wider as well, and it'll balance out with the top part that isn't quite as big. Make some little fine-tune adjustments here. I think I need to adjust this. It's like, it looks a little too skinny right there. I like this outside line, so I'm gonna move over the inside one a little bit, just a little bit. Barely even noticeable. I think I'm really happy with that. I do believe that would be enough room for my fingers now. We only dropped that a 1/4 inch, but a 1/4 inch makes a big difference. And if you're unsure whether or not that's going to be enough room, something you can do when you get your sketch finished is to make a copy of it or trace over it, and then take that tracing or copy, spray a little contact spray adhesive on it, put it on a piece of cardboard, cut around your drawing, and then you can actually hold it in your hand and visually see the clearance between your handle and the guard. And that'll give you a really good indicator of how much room you have there. You're going to want, when it's just a cardboard cutout, you're going to want to make sure there's enough room that your finger isn't quite hitting on here, because when you have a full-blown handle, you definitely don't want your finger to hit on the bottom part of the guard. And what I'm trying to say is the cardboard isn't going to be 100% true to the real knife, because the cardboard is really skinny and the real knife is going to be, you know, like 3/4 of an inch thick. But it's a good indicator, and it'll really help you see more even than just a sketch laying on paper and me holding my hand on it. I've done enough of these though that I can pretty much hold my hand on there like it's a handle, and almost always I'll be able to tell if there's enough room there. But when it comes to the real guard, I'll normally give myself a little wiggle room. I'll make it a little thicker than I need it to be, and I'll come in and make adjustments if I need to, and grind away a little more material here, because I leave myself more room here than I need. And that way I can kind of fine tune and tweak it on the real knife. But it's good to get it close here. Okay, there's one more thing I want to do to the guard. And with this style of guard, I normally have a little area in the middle right here that's like a little flat area. You can kind of see it on this dagger guard here. So I need to draw a little line there and a little line here. All these other lines, those are gold inlay that I drew in. So kind of ignore that for now. Now this little flat area, I don't like it to be the same size as the ricasso. I actually like it to be slightly smaller than the ricasso. Like a 1/16 of an inch smaller is pretty good. So I can come in here and just measure 1/16 smaller than the ricasso. So I'm measuring off of this spine of the blade here, and then I'm going to measure off the ricasso down here. And we'll just make it 1/16 of an inch smaller. And then I'm going to try to draw that line across as square as I can get it without using a square or anything. So on the real knife, this would end up being a flat spot. It's a really good place to put some gold inlay or engraving or something like that, a little embellishment. but it also can look really nice just polished up. So this would be a flat spot, and then I would have these, I would shape these with a round wheel, so they'd be all kind of dished. If you look at the guard from an end view, flip the guard over and look at it from the end, it would look something, let me see if I can draw this. It would look something like this. Okay, that is not proportionate, but here's kind of what you're looking at. See these flat areas? That's what this is right here. And then this part gets all dished out and has a nice curve to it. And then the actual guard itself, at the very thinnest right here and right here, I'm normally going to shoot for around 1/8 of an inch to maybe 3/16. 3/16 might be a little bit thick. I like to get these pretty thin. I think I've done a couple that were maybe even just under 1/8 of an inch up here, because there's no need for the guard to be like overly chunky. I've done a couple overly chunky in the past, but I'm not that proud of them. I like to thin them down pretty nice these days. The reason you don't want these lines in line with the ricasso is because I find when I've done that it just throws things off. It looks like it's trying to compete with that line too much because it's in line, and it makes you question whether or not it's perfectly in line with the ricasso or with the spine. And if you rotate the knife in your hand a little bit, those lines kind of look like they're up or down or whatever. So I find it works out a lot better just to have those lines offset from the ricasso. Make that area a little bit smaller than the ricasso. Also, it makes this little flat area smaller than the ricasso. It can help too. If you make it the same size as the ricasso, this flat area here just begins to get a little on the large side. You could also make it a little bit smaller than what I did here, but I wouldn't go too much smaller. This is 1/16 smaller than the ricasso on each side. Probably would stick to about that unless my ricasso, if I was making some massive knife and it had a, 1.1/8 or 1.25 ricasso, that's when you could maybe make these like an 1/8 of an inch smaller than the ricasso on each side. I am going to have another coffee break. And we're pretty much done with the guard. We still haven't finished stage 3 though, which was stage 2, which is the front spacer and guard assembly. If you like what I'm teaching here with how I do sketches, then I want you to check out learnsketchmaking.com. Making sketches can be really difficult sometimes, but I try to break it down and kind of give you the mentality behind what I'm doing. And the sketches that I made on learnsketchmaking.com are really, really detailed. Spent many days creating 4 different knife sketches. Check out the link in the description. Learnsketchmaking.com. Super detailed instruction on how to make 4 of those sketches and all the other courses as well. For the front spacer, I think I want to do for the front spacer, we need to decide on how many pieces we want, or like how thick it needs to be. So for a lot of my front spacers, I like to do multiple pieces, and there's a lot of variations you could do here. You could have a thin piece with maybe some file work on it, and then a thicker piece with maybe a groove or some gold inlay or something, and then another matching thin piece with some file work. So that would be like I would call a 3-piece front spacer. You could do a 1-piece thicker front spacer that just has file work or embellishment or something on it. You could do a thick file work piece and then a really thin piece in the middle and then another thick piece. There's a lot of different variations you can do. For this sketch, I think I want to do a 3-piece front spacer. And let's do 2 thicker pieces on the outside, sandwiching 1 thinner piece that might have file work or something in the middle. So I'm thinking for this layout, let's do an 1/8 inch thick piece. And then, you know what? No, I think I want it thicker. I think I want the outside pieces thicker. let's do a 3/16 inch piece. I know, really big design change, right? Going from an 1/8 to 3/16. Let's do a 3/16 and then a 1/16 and then another 3/16. Okay. Let's come down here, do the same thing, and we'll have a layout. Connect all those lines. Boop. Beep. And a boop. Yeah, I think that'll be really nice. We could do a groove, some little accents on these thicker pieces, and maybe some really cool little file work on this thinner piece in the middle. That middle piece could be even thinner and do some really, really tiny, delicate file work on it, but I think I'll leave it like that. Next thing I want to do is continue that line. I can already see that line from the spine. I want to brighten that up across there. And then I want to continue this bottom line for the ricasso. I want to continue that across there. I want all these spacers to be the exact same size as the front spacer, or as the ricasso rather. And when I say the exact same size, on my actual knife, I want them to be the same size or maybe 5 to 10 thousandths of an inch larger than the ricasso. I normally just draw it the same size, but I will sometimes make them ever so slightly larger than the ricasso. Something that you don't want on a knife like this is for the front spacer assembly to be smaller than the ricasso area there. It might look kind of funny. There are some historical antique buoys and stuff where the ricasso and handle assembly is smaller than the ricasso. So if you're making one of those reproductions, then go for it. But on most of the knives I do, I don't like to see that actually smaller unless it's on purpose. I don't want to accidentally see that got smaller than the ricasso there. So I'm just going to come out here. We already know that's 1 inch wide. Give myself a mark 1 inch wide there. That way I know I'm getting the line pretty straight. Let me bold that up a little bit. Give a straight line across here. Okay. Let me darken this up. Get rid of that little extra there where I went over too far. Okay. That's looking really good. I think this would make a nice front spacer assembly. I'm just looking at it from some different directions, making sure that it looks good. Why does it look like something's going off on an angle to me? I don't know. It looks straight when I hold the ruler up to it. As far as front spacer assemblies go, I would say this one is on the wider end of the spectrum. It's not the widest you could go, but as far as the way I do them, if you started to stack up too many pieces that were thicker than this, you might run into some unique problems, like with the way you shape your handle. Could look funny with the front spacer matching the ricasso shape. So if you stack up more and more and more, you're going to run into some situations where you actually might need the front spacer assembly to match more of your handle shape instead of matching these straight lines on the ricasso. But yeah, this one's on the wider side. The overall length or width on this one is it's a 1/16 under a half there, so almost a 1/2 inch. I would say that most of my front spacer assemblies, when you stack up the 2 or 3 different pieces that I'll have on there, normally come out to be, I would say, in the range of about 3/8 of an inch to about a 1/2 inch, kind of in that ballpark. On a buoy like this, if I start to see a front spacer that's maybe less than 1/4 of an inch, it might look kind of funny or out of place unless something in the handle material can really make up for it. Certain handle materials or handle shapes can make up for the front spacer being really small, but I like to see something on my style of buoys that's about 3/8 of an inch of total pieces, or a half, kind of in that range. I think that looks really good. I think we're ready to move on to stage 3 and do the handle and pommel assembly. I'm looking at this knife, kind of turn it around, inspect it from different directions and stuff. I think I really like what we've got going on with the guard. I like what we've got going on with the blade, this kind of Sheffield style clip. If anything, you could possibly raise the tip of this blade up a little bit. I don't know if it's enough that it's worth doing or not. And sometimes I would move it up and they'd be like, no, I liked it before, and have to move it back down. Don't worry if that happens to you, because that happens to me a lot. That's why we're doing this on paper, is so you can move these lines around and see how you want it right now before it's too late. If you grind that down and get it to the shape you want, or the shape you think you want, out with the real blade, with Damascus that you spend a bunch of time on, and then you're like, oh, I think I want to try raising it up. It's too late at that point, unless you're able to still put it back in the forge and like hammer something around. Now's the time to experiment and move lines around, because it's just paper and lead currently, or graphite. Okay, so let's start drawing in the handle. I like to start with the spine of the handle, kind of get that established, and then I'll do the angle on the end of the handle, and then kind of come in and do the bottom part of the handle here. So we've got this line that continues out from the spine of the blade, and I'm going to follow that to start with, but I'm not going to have the handle be the exact same size as the front spacer. You can totally do that. That's a style of handle that looks really good. Having all this flush, having the spacers and the handle material flush, looks really cool. For most of my knives, I like to do another style where I have the handle material slightly larger than the metal components, and then I'll have a little tiny bull-nosed corner. I call it a bull-nosed corner because I did a lot of drywall with my dad growing up, and we put these really cool rounded corners on a lot of the drywall work that we did, and those were called bull-nose. So to me, this just really reminds me of a bull-nose drywall. So that's why I call it a bull-nose. But people also call it a museum fit. And there's some other names for it too that are completely blanking on the top of my head right now. Okay, so I'm just adding in that bull-nose. I don't know if you can see it. I'll try to make that line show back up. Here's the line from the spine. I'm going to make this handle ever so slightly than that line from the spine. So whatever size this front spacer is here, it should be 1 inch. Well, it's somehow a little over 1 inch. Yeah, I don't know how that happened. It's slightly over 1 inch. We'll just leave it there. So whatever your front spacer size is, your handle material is going to be a little bit larger. So if your front spacer and ricasso are on the wide side, your handle is going to be a step wider. So when you do this technique and you do this museum fit or this bullnose, you really got to be careful not to let things stack up and get out of hand too much. You might want to make your ricasso and your front spacer assembly slightly more skinny or narrow than you would if you were doing a flush fit up, just because that handle is going to be a step up larger and you don't want things to start looking too big. So if I measure this right here, it looks like I made it, I don't know, about a 1/2 larger. On the real knife, it's hard to draw it in how it's going to be on the real knife because it's going to be very subtle on the real knife. I normally shoot for 30 to 40 thousandths, which I guess is about a 1/2, which is pretty much what I drew, I guess. That's kind of the ballpark range I like to shoot for. Sometimes I'll do the bullnose, though, really, really tiny and delicate, where it's like 15, 20 thousandths. I normally try not to go over about 40 thousandths, though. Every once in a while I will. If you go over that, it starts to be too much, and it looks like there's too much of a size difference. So I'm just going to have this line. I'm going to have it parallel the line from our spine that we first started with. I want to have that parallel for at least 1 inch or so. So I'd say that's about 1 inch. It's not really paralleling. It's actually going up a little bit. Let's see if I can parallel it. Okay, we want to have that line going straight. It's going to look really good with this straight line on the spine, straight line on the front spacer. Having a little bit of that handle start out straight before it starts dropping down is going to be really good. On this handle, I don't really want it to drop down immediately when it starts. So from here, I'm going to just lightly have it drop down. Let's maybe make a target for ourselves. So we see this line that represents the spine. Let's shoot for about right here, about 1/4 of an inch below that line. And we'll just see how that looks. At first, I'm having this drop very, very subtly. Something like that. Now I'm going to get rid of this line because it's just in the way now. Get rid of it up here. Clear everything up. A little weird flat spot in there. Or a weird little hump, I mean. Okay, let's look at that. See how that looks. That's not a lot of drop. Could probably go a little bit more. I like to kind of look at things from different angles and stuff. Also, a little trick I have that I do sometimes. I don't know, see if I can get my face in there. Sometimes when I'm looking down one of these lines and I'm looking for like bumps or something, it's a lot easier to see if you have a bump in one of the curved lines by kind of looking down it from the end. You can see if there's a weird little like bloop or something in the line. And I know that's crazy dramatic, but I like to look down the paper long ways. It's especially helpful when drawing in a clip or something. You can look down it like this, or you can pick, I normally don't put my head down like this. I'll pick the paper up and look down it and really see how smooth those curves are, make little adjustments. Anyway, that's kind of a sidetrack point. Let's have this handle drop down a little bit more. Let's shoot for that much more. Probably 330 seconds more. See how that looks. At some point, though, we'll have to just draw the rest of the handle and then maybe make adjustments. I don't want to go too crazy extreme with this. It's not like this is like a real curvy fighter or something. On a really extreme recurve fighter, might have the handle drop a lot. But we're trying to keep it clean, kind of classic, straight, slim, elegant. Doesn't need to get too crazy looking when it comes to the handle drop for this. If we look at, I'll pull out the recurve sketch that I did on the course, learnsketchmaking.com. If we compare that, you can see this line right here that originally represented the spine. I know it's kind of wonky since it's so curvy, but this originally represented the spine. You see how much this dropped? This dropped down so much compared to what I'm doing here. We've got this line that's only dropping down like a little over 1/4 inch so far. Okay, I'm going to wipe my nose. And do a coffee break. And a water break. Okay, I'm liking that. We can always come back and change it later. Next, I like to work on this, this angle on the end of the handle. So what I kind of visualize when I'm doing this, if you take a square, I know it's a rounded surface there, so you can't really just plop a square on it and have a perfect thing to go by. But I kind of like to visualize that last little bit of curve and then kind of hit the middle of that curve. So I'm not going by this part of the curve right here. If I were, the thing would be like that. I'm not going by this part up here. It would be like that. I'm kind of doing the middle ground of that little bit of curve right there. And that's a good starting place normally. Normally I don't use the square. I just kind of visually do it. but we'll see how that looks with actually putting a square on there. You know what? Let's go with it for now. Let's go with it for now and draw in this part. I almost have a feeling that I needed to have it angle in a little bit more. Let's just see how it looks. The way you shape the end of the handle and how much angle you give it really comes down to personal preference, and it's kind of a looks and feel thing. Some people have them really straight. Like it'll almost be actually square with the spine of the knife. And there's technically not anything wrong with that. And if that's a look that you enjoy, I don't personally enjoy that look on this kind of a knife. Some people might have a really extreme angle on there. Really down to personal preference. Okay, for the bottom of the handle, this part's a little bit trickier to draw in than the top, because what I want to do is I want to have an area that drops down that is kind of represents the middle of my fingers. So if I put my hands on here, or actually this is hand. I don't know. I guess that would be hands. I'll put my hand on here. I'm going to try to kind of center it up on the handle. I'm not going to jam my hand all the way at the guard. I'm going to kind of center it up a little bit. Maybe it's towards the guard a little bit, but it's going to be kind of a comfortable position. It's not like I'm fighting for my life position. It's just I'm comfortable. I'm holding the knife. I'd probably put my hand about right there. I'm going to come in and draw myself a little line in between my fingers right here. Just real lightly. And continue that up a little bit further. So this is going to represent where I want the palm swell to be on my handle, and it's going to represent where I want this little drop down to come to a point at. I want it to come to a point about right there. It's because I want my center fingers, the center of my two fingers there on each side to just kind of meet right at that little point. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Don't forget to draw on your bowl nose or your museum fit right here. So it's going to be slightly larger than the front spacer. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to start drawing this kind of parallel. Remember how I kept this straight? You almost want this to be straight too, but not for nearly as long. It doesn't have to be straight. Yeah, I can't get what I'm trying to say out of my brain. I'm probably just... What you absolutely don't want is for it to angle up like this. And then like drop down. We don't want to see that. Oops. On this handle, we want the very front of the handle to be the narrowest point. We don't want to see any other points become more narrow than the very front of the handle. So that's why that doesn't really work. So this first little bit for like a point, you can either have it be parallel to this top line, or you can actually go ahead and let it start dropping down a little bit on the bottom. It's okay if the bottom starts dropping down immediately, as long as it's very delicate at first. You don't want to have it you don't want to have it going too crazy. For example, what we don't want to see is if the handle drops down like that. That's just a little too much drop down right off the bat. Too extreme. Also, that's way too wide right there. If it just gently drops down, or it just kind of starts out parallel, that's okay. So let me kind of draw this in. Okay, I think it needs to drop down a little bit more. There we go, about a pencil thickness more. Let me make sure that looks okay. To me, this looks way too far back for some reason. Let me get my hand on here. Yeah, I put my hand up more towards the guard here a little bit more. I mean, even when you're comfortably holding it, also it might not be bad to kind of close your fingers up. Yeah, I feel like I can move that forward a little bit. It's just a little bit. Let's move it up like 1/8 of an inch right there. Okay. I think that's going to be a better spot. I think I might have had my hand a little too far back. Let's just kind of put my hand up against the guard. Got a little extra leftover handle here. But your hand is going to kind of, when you grab the handle, this part of your hand is going to, it's going to kind of smush out and use up more of the handle than it looks like we're using right now. Once your hand kind of wraps around it. Okay, I think that's going to be good. Let's work on this next curve. So I want to have this kind of, I'm going to have this curve, something like this. I want it to kind of match that line a little bit, or at least look like they go together somehow. And kind of bring that around, something like that. Yeah, so ignore what I said earlier about centering up that square on there. Let's just forget about the square. I don't even know why I was like, hey, put a square in here. In my mind, it worked out really well. But what I do, I visually look at this and I can tell that this just looks funny. Here, I'll put that back and explain why it looks funny. This just comes down to this really weird kind of triangular point right here and looks really off to me. It didn't look that much off until I got this bottom line on there. That's when it really started standing out. What you can do is you can actually put like a ruler on there and kind of visualize how that would look if you change the angle on the end of the handle. I think it's going to look better if we go for something more like this. So let me erase. Actually, let me leave that on there so you can see both of them side by side. Let's go with that. Okay, so I changed up the angle there a bit. Let's erase that. That's looking better. I'm liking that a lot more now. Let's have that drop down slightly further. Let's keep tweaking this bottom line because it's not quite right yet. I think I want to make this a little bit more dramatic. Have it drop down. Let's try having it drop down about 1/8 of an inch more. The little point doesn't look dramatic enough for what I want. I think when you put your hand on it, it wouldn't even be noticeable. I want to point out something really important about handle shaping and stuff too that kind of applies to this sketch. When you're just sitting here drawing a two-dimensional sketch, sometimes things can look like too crazy, too far out of whack. This point could look really extreme, like the distance between here. This might look really big. This might look way too thick. But you need to keep in mind that with most handles, you're going to be rounding over all the corners and stuff and really turning all these square shapes into rounded shapes. The spine's going to get rounded, or it's going to be kind of an oval shape maybe. The bottom of this is going to get rounded. It's going to become really comfortable. And once you round and shape all this handle, these harsh lines that we're only seeing in 2 dimensions right now, they get softened up a lot, and your handle looks skinnier a lot of times than what your original drawing is. So sometimes, as long as it's not too extreme, if your drawing looks a little harsh, like things are a little chunky and a little bit like this drop looks pretty extreme right now, but I'm telling you right now that once you shape this handle, everything's going to get softened up a little bit and it's not going to look quite as extreme as what it looks now. You could still go too far with that and make things way too extreme now, and then they still look extreme after the handle's done. But I just wanted to point that out a little bit. I need to keep tweaking this. Something's not quite right, and I haven't put my finger on it yet. I'm just going to look at it from some different directions. Something's not right with this bottom. I'm almost considering dropping the handle a little bit more and dropping this a little bit more. Maybe. I do like where that point is. It's looking like it's pretty much centered with my fingers when I put my hand on there where I think it's going to be. So I think I like where it's located this direction. Let me just try dropping that a little bit more. Let's go another 1/16 inch or so. Might be too much, but let's just try it. Yeah, I think what I want to do here is I want to have this taper real gradually and then kind of get more extreme at the end. Maybe try that. Real gradual, and then right here at the end, maybe have it change. I don't even know if I did what I just said I was going to do there. It still came out pretty gradual. Oops. Okay, I think that's starting to work. This might be a little too extreme. We'll see as I draw in the rest of the handle. Let's focus on the pommel. The pommel is going to soften up this handle and really help how it looks. Right now, we've got these extreme sharp corners on here, and that's not how the actual handle is going to be. So let's draw the pommel in. We're going to do a domed pommel on the end of here, and that should help soften up how the end of this handle looks and maybe give us a better idea of how things are looking overall. Because overall, something right now looks kind of off. And I think it's because the end of this handle is just throwing me right now since it's not finished. So let's keep this line the very end of the pommel. Okay? So I'm going to measure back towards me here, and we'll decide on how thick we want the pommel to be. I think for this knife, I think we're going to keep it real simple, and we're just going to have a one-piece pommel. What you can do, though, is you can come in there and do multiple pieces and make them relate to the front spacer assembly if you want to. One way of making that easier would be to maybe do one thick piece in the middle with two thin pieces on the outside, and then on the other end here for the pommel, have a thin piece with file work or something on it, and then have your thick piece be the pommel. And then they tie in together, and you have a theme going on. I don't want to have a thick piece and then a thin piece and then the pommel, though, on the end here, because I think it would just stack up and be a little too much for what I want on this knife. So I think for this theme, I'm going to keep it a little bit more simple. I'm just going to have a thick pommel piece that will tie into one of these pieces here. And we're only going to have the thin piece on the front. So if I was making this knife in real life, what I would do is plan out whatever material this is what I would have if this was like gun-blued steel, I would have that be the same on the pommel and kind of have that all tie in together. So let's go with, what did I make those, like 3/16? Let's go with a 1/4 inch thick pommel. I know these are 3/16, but we're going to dome the end of it. And let's just go with a 1/4 inch. And after it's domed, it'll probably look thinner than a 1/4 inch, actually. It'll probably look like it's more like an 1/8 inch or something. So 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch. The handle's still 5 inches long in total. And I normally count from the front of the guard to the very end of the handle. I do not count the pommel nut. Sometimes the pommel nut will stick out further. Normally don't count those unless it's a really unique scenario where you got like an elaborate dagger and the pommel nut sticks out quite a bit further and it actually becomes part of the measurement too, possibly. But normally on a knife like this, I don't. So there's a 1/4 inch. Okay, now to start drawing in this pommel, first thing I want to do is erase this right here because we want to do the same bullnose thing that we did on the front of the handle. We want that to be back here at the pommel too. So we need to make the pommel. I normally come in and just undersize the pommel a little bit. I'm going to hit these corners off and round those over a little bit. Actually going to mostly erase this line. I'll leave a little bit of it there in the middle. Let's round these corners, do our little bullnosed museum fit corners. And we'll come in and make the pommel slightly smaller than the front spacer. Or I mean the handle. And with these angles, I like to have the pommel angles matching the handle shape. So right now, what I'm talking about is this line right here. See how this line just flows through here? And it keeps going like this. If you were to extend this line out for the pommel shape, I want it to follow the shape of the handle. Not real noticeable up here on the top because this is pretty much square. Where it is noticeable though is down here. I don't want to have my pommel going straight that way. I want to have it following this line. See how that line shoots off in that direction? I want to have it following that. Okay, let me give myself another measurement here to follow. Let me give myself a line at 1/8 of an inch. I think that's how much we'll make the pommel dome 1/8 of an inch. Like that. Get rid of this excess. And now I'm just going to hand draw in the actual dome of it. So we've got this little mark left here that was a 1/4 inch. Let me erase that. That kind of got a little thicker than a 1/4 inch. I like that. That looks like a good pommel for this knife. And immediately, having that pommel drawn on there is immediately kind of changing the feel and vibe of this handle a lot. And in a positive way, I think. The handle is starting to look more and more how I want it to. Still think something's a little bit off, though. Let me play around with this line. Maybe flatten out that curve ever so slightly. Like a pencil thickness. All right, I'm starting to like that. I am starting to like that. Let's see how my hand looks on here. Remember, if you want a more accurate feel of the knife, once you get your sketch done, make a copy, spray adhesive it to a piece of cardboard, cut it out, and then you can actually have something tangible to hold in your hand. If you really want to go an extra step, you could even like take a 1x4 or something and cut it out of wood and do a little bit of shaping. But that's normally more excessive than I normally go. But you could do that if you really wanted to. Okay, I'm liking that a lot. I think I want to add in a nice crispy line right here where the palm swell kind of terminates. On a lot of my handles, I like to have super crisp line on the handle that kind of comes up from this point, and then it wraps around and kind of goes out to the pommel. I think it looks really cool. It adds in quite a bit of work, because anytime you're adding in a crisp line, that means there's a crisp line that can be easily rounded over. So it does add a fair amount of work, but it looks so cool. So for this line, I'm going to shoot for kind of this angle. A little bit of the line's going to be kind of straight at first, and then it'll start wrapping around. I'm not going to shoot for square with the blade, and I'm not shooting for this either. I'm kind of in between the two angles. Something like that. These can be kind of hard to draw in accurately until you've shaped one or two of these handles. For now, you can kind of just copy what I'm doing, but then after you shape a couple handles, you'll really start to get a feel for how this line actually comes into being and how it interacts with the spine. Until you've actually shaped one, though, it can be kind of guessing on how much it's going to like curve back and how far down it's going to come the handle and everything. But this should just give you a general idea of how it's going to look. Okay, now I'm going to start having it curve back. I'm going to have it start curving back sooner than that. Let's have it start curving back about here. Too much of a straight line there. Gently curving back, then getting more extreme. I'm going to have it get about 1/4 of an inch or so from the spine. The spine of the handle. I don't even know. I know you call this the spine of a blade. It makes sense to call this the spine of a handle, but I don't know if I've ever heard anybody refer to this part of the handle as a spine or not. So it'll probably get the closest about right here, and then I like to have it drop down. It adds a really cool effect. It's almost mimicking how the handle drops down right here. So I'm going to have this line just gently drop down a little bit. I'm going to change this curve a little bit too. I think it's a little too harsh. I think we can smooth it out a little bit, make it a little more gradual. Just a little bit. Okay, I'm going to sit here and look at this for a second, and I'm going to take a coffee break while I look at it. I think this is going to indicate, a little change I want to make on the handle. These things really happen like building blocks sometimes. You do one thing and it kind of informs you on something that you previously did, and you can make a little tweak to it. I think after drawing this line in, I think I could actually make this pommel slightly wider. It might be a little bit on the skinny side. If I added a little bit to the pommel here, it would give the handle a little bit more shape. It would make it drop just a little bit. I think it would look good. And I didn't see that until I got this line in there. I like having this line drop a little bit, but after making that line, I was like, well, this handle doesn't really look like it's dropping much anymore. Or, these lines almost look parallel, and I actually want them to, parallel's okay, but I want them to almost veer off from each other a little bit more. So let's just try it. Let's drop this handle down. I'm going to shoot for it just so you can see how much I'm talking. Maybe that much. Not a lot. Shouldn't be a lot of work. We're just talking about the back end of the handle. I think I'm happy with the front. I would approach that from the wrong angle. That's probably too much. I'm gonna do half that. So here's where my handle previously was. There's where I was just doing it. Let's go for the middle of those two. We're talking like a 1/16 of an inch difference. Okay, just gonna fix my little bullnose thing here. Oh, just erased a bunch. Continue that pommel out. Connect that line. Make a little adjustment to this domed end. Okay, and now analyze. I think I like that drop. I think that's good. I'm going to change this. I'm going to have this not get quite so close to the spine. That was probably a little closer than it would have been in real life. I like this pommel. I'm going to make a change right here, though, or at least I'm going to try to. If it comes out the same, then I probably just need to leave it. I'm going to have this angle changed differently. So what I did here, I think I like it. Instead of having this curve gradually go through here, I straightened this up a little bit and then had the curve get a little bit more extreme right here. Let me try to do that on this side too. Okay, I think I'm liking that a lot. I still feel like I could drop the top of the handle down a little bit more, but it wouldn't be much at all, especially after dropping this down. I'd be like, all right, let's drop this a 16th, drop this another 16th, but it's really very close. That might have been a little too much. Let me smooth that out a little bit. Okay, I think that's looking really good. Let me continue this line on the edge of the pommel. Because the handle's shaped like this with this sharp line on here, the pommel would also be shaped to match it. So the pommel would have that little sharp line on it right there as well. This little sharp line would only be on the edge of the pommel though. So I'm not going to continue that line right here because this part of the pommel represents the domed end of the pommel. This little 1/8 inch area here represents the edge. So we're only going to have it on the edge part. Okay, I'm liking that a lot. Let's go ahead and draw in the pommel nut. As far as pommel nut shapes go, oh boy, there's a lot of variation you can do. You can make a little round ball on the end. You can make a little stud on the end. This is something that I do quite often. Really, really simple little pommel nut, but I like this a lot because it's kind of got this unobtrusive, like classic vibe. It doesn't take away too much. Sometimes I want something really crazy and elaborate though that's really eye-catching, so I'll do some kind of crazy, curvy, fiery, flamey looking thing that's like, I don't know, Hershey Kiss on steroids or something. Normally not on this kind of a knife though. That would be more on a fancy dagger or something. This kind of knife, since we're kind of going for a clean classic vibe, I think it needs something that's not too flamey. Something clean, elegant, simple, that kind of ties in with the rest of the knife. What would I do? What would look good on this? Okay. I think I have an idea. Let's do a really classic shape that I think would look good. When I say classic, I mean classic for me, not necessarily classic as far as it's been on historic pieces, but classic Kyle Royer shape. Let's find the center of the handle real quick. So it looks like it's a 1 5/8. So let's find the center. Should be about right there. Let me confirm that I did my math properly. Yep. So this is the center of the handle. Now, here's a really good thing I can talk about. When it comes to designing a knife, similar to how we made this guard smaller on the top than the bottom, there's a similar thing that happens back here with the pommel. And for similar reasons that you don't want the plunge like tipped backwards because it makes the knife look slow, with the pommel nut, you want it to be in the center of the handle or above center. So let's say like up here a little bit. What you do not ever want to happen on a knife like this is for the pommel nut to be below center. If your pommel nut comes out below center, it's going to look off and really, really funny. So let me just draw a little pommel nut off center here. We'll just do a real simple plain one. If you put your pommel nut right there, I know this is extreme, but I've seen some that were really extreme off center and they look extreme. But even if you just gently put it off center and it's below center, to me, that just looks really, really off. And there's something glaringly wrong when I look at this handle now. And my eye can't look at anything except for that pommel nut. Like I'm just stuck on that pommel nut and it's like so distracting to me. I know that was really extreme though, but it can still have that effect even if you just do it a little bit off center. You can just, even if your brain can't figure out what's off, it'll just be telling you that something's off and you might not even be able to put your finger on it. So I like them to be perfectly centered, or you can have it slightly above center. Just like with the way that I'll ever so slightly tip this forward or tip the guard forward, or on a fighter or something, I'll tip it way forward and it makes it look like it's faster. If you put that above center, it can make the knife look like it's faster. Things are flowing better. And it actually doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt near as much to put it way off center. So I'm going to go as extreme off center towards the top as I did the bottom. And we'll kind of compare that. This is pretty extreme. I don't think I've ever put one that far to the top. But let's see how that looks. I mean, that looks a little too far to the top to me, but it does not take away from the knife. And it doesn't make me stare at it thinking that there's like a horrible problem somewhere. I could live with that. Not quite where I would put it, but I could live with that. So what I'm going to do is actually put it very close to center. Here, there's our center line. Kind of erase most of it. I'm going to go close to center, but slightly up by just a little bit. And the reason I'm doing that is just to make sure that it doesn't end up below center when it comes to the real knife, because I do not want it below center. So let's go about that wide. I don't know how wide that is. Let me measure it. A little over 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to do a classic shape that I've done a lot. It's classic for me. We're going to do a little rounded groove. Something kind of like this. And then we're going to put a nice little domed top on it. I think that would make a beautiful little pommel nut it's got some elegance going on. There's some curves and shape to it. But yet it's not crazy, crazy exotic with flamey, crazy shapes, because this isn't that kind of knife. Let me clean that back up. Make this a little bit more bold. I actually think that pommel nut would work great on this Bowie. And it kind of, in a way, it might be a little bit of a stretch, but I feel like it kind of harkens to the shapes that we decided on for the tips of the guard. So we've got kind of these cool rounded shapes that meet at a point here. In a way, kind of got that going on right here. We've got this like rounded shape that meets at a point. Probably a bit of a stretch, but I like to think of things that way sometimes and try to kind of tie in shapes together. Even if they're kind of different, they're still tied in some tiny way. In the LearnSketchmaking.com course, one of the knives we covered is this Quillian dagger that's meant to pass something like your Mastersmith test. We've got the blade that's 10 inches long and fluted handle with twisted wire and stuff, Quillian guard. On this one, I was trying to kind of tie in these guard shapes a little bit into the pommel. So right here with this guard, you can kind of see this rounded out area, and then we've got this little flamey shape. Well, I kind of took those same shapes. We've got this curve right here, kind of represents this curve, and then we've got this little thing that kind of ties into that, and then this shape right here is kind of like this. When it meets up and mirrors on the other side, that's kind of what you end up with. So it doesn't always work, and I'm still not 100% certain this would be kind of a crazy far out there pommel, but I think it would be really cool. But I was just trying to tie in some of those shapes together and give it a cohesive theme. And you can kind of do that even with little things like this. Just having that rounded curve there, I feel like ties in a little bit with this pommel nut shape. I think the final thing this pommel nut needs is a little hole, because pretty much all the knives I make are takedowns, and I would have a little like 16th inch or 3/32 inch hole. And I would probably put it right there. And that allows me to take a small drill bit or a small round rod and tighten and loosen that pommel nut. I can even put, like if this was my small round rod, of course it'd be much smaller, but I can put a pair of pliers on each side of it or small vice grips and really crank it down tight before I ship it off to the customer, even with a little tiny 16th inch hardened steel rod. Now that little dot isn't going to necessarily end up facing the viewer from the side, but it might. I normally let those come out however they want to. Sometimes people will key those a certain direction so that that dot will always be like vertical, or it'll always come off to the side. I worry about a lot of things on knives, but that's one thing that I've never really felt compelled to worry about, is where that little dot comes out to be. Because as you're working on the knife and stuff and you're sanding things down, things slowly move and things turn. And even after the knife has been out there for a while, the handle material could shrink or expand a little bit, and the handle might need to be tightened or loosened after a couple of years, and then that keyed hole would move a little bit possibly anyway. So one thing I don't worry about at all, and I normally just draw it in there to represent how that would look. I think this looks good. I'm just looking at the knife overall. I think this is looking really good. I like the proportions of the blade size to the guard size to the handle size. I think they fit well together. I think it was a good decision to skinny that blade up. That 1/8 of an inch we took away from the blade in the beginning definitely helped a lot. There is something, though, that's still drawing my attention down here. So I think we're ready to move into stage 4 and do fine tuning and add any embellishments on. And the fine tuning I think I want to do immediately is this blade. I think I want to try bringing that clip back a little further, this curved part. I want to bring it back a little further, maybe raise that tip up just a little bit and see how that looks. I might not like it as much, and we might end up undoing it. So the clip ends right here. Let's bring it back. Let's only bring it back like that much more. That'll probably have a big, possibly have a big influence on how it looks. Let's bring the tip up. Maybe question mark. Let me put the square on, or the level. The square. It's not a square or a level. Put the straight edge on there. Yep. Let's raise the tip up by about 1/16 of an inch. Okay. Also, coffee break. I don't know if you can see in there, but it's almost gone. I did this at the beginning. I'm just putting the straight edge on here and doing a straight line because the straight line will help me draw a curved line. If you have something like a really large, like French curve, I believe it's called, or something, you might be able to use that as a template to help you draw this in as well without without the need to freehand draw that curve in. Okay, let's have it curved down about this much. This is just a reference to help me draw in this curved line. Having that straight line there can really help me. I'm just tapering this line until I meet my target goal right here. And now I'm going to taper this back the other way until we meet the tip. Sometimes I'll come and go from the tip and go the other direction. It's easier sometimes. And you can see my head. I'll get my head in there. I'm looking down it, and I can see that it's clearly got some issues. There's like a big old catty-wonkus thing going on here. Does not flow well. The longer this clip gets, I keep making it longer and longer, the more difficult it is to draw in this long curve. Okay, let me get rid of that straight line. Look down it a little bit. Got a weird flat spot in it right here. Little hump. Just erase the top of it off and fix it. Okay. Okay, I think I'm digging this. I'm liking this. Let's draw in the bottom part here, the actual grind of the clip. Try to get that to gently taper away to pretty much nothing at the tip. I'm going to draw a little angled line So this most of the time doesn't really show up on the final knife, but if you're doing something like plain carbon or stainless steel or something and it's not Damascus, and you're very, very, and I mean very extremely careful, you can end up with a beautiful little crisp line right here. Do you see where this curved line meets up with this straight line? About right there, right there. And then where the curved line on the top meets up with the spine, which is like right there. Well, if you're very, very, very careful, you can end up with a very delicate little crisp line connecting those 2 points when you grind this in. Most of the time, it definitely doesn't show up on Damascus because by the time you etch it and stuff, it just disappears. It's the slightest little angle change ever, but it can be, it's definitely can be there. So I just wanted to point that out. Let me fix the tip. We raised the tip up a little bit, so I need to redraw this a little bit. Bring that up there. Yeah. Yeah, I'm really liking that. I feel like it slimmed down the tip a little bit. We've got that portion. This curved portion is a little bit longer now. I think that really helped the overall knife out a little bit. I think if you took the handle away, if you completely block out the handle and just look at the knife, this looks a little extreme. But when you look at the whole knife as a whole picture altogether, I think it really works. Maybe I curved that a little bit too much, maybe a little bit straighter, but I especially like how adding that little bit of length helped to make it look a little bit skinnier overall. And I'm liking this clip now. I think that blade is finally where I'm happy with it. Ever since we started with the blade, I've just always been a little bit like not quite sold on it. Like something was a little off. Let me get rid of some of these extra lines here. Okay, so that's one little thing. So embellishments and touching up things, stage 4. That's what we're on now, the final stage. Can bold up this, make this edge a little bit more bold. I like to draw in my maker's mark, kind of an embellishment in a way. It really makes the sketch pop, and it's really going to be there, so you might as well draw it in. I don't worry about making it the perfect size or anything. I just try to get it close to what it would look like on the real knife. Of course, I can't hand draw it as good as my as clean as my stencil is going to look. My mark is K tilde Royer tilde MS. Yeah, those letters are not not really consistent size, but do my best here. Just about ran out of room. Okay, that looks pretty good. Trim some off that K. K Royer MS. Adds a nice little embellishment on there. Something else we could do is we could add in some file work on the front spacers here. So I think when I was deciding on how thick to make these front spacers, I kind of had file work in mind that I was thinking already. I think we'll do a rounded groove in each one of these large pieces. A little tiny groove on the edges. They might not be quite thick enough for that in real life, but they might be. I don't know. Let's just see how it looks here. Let me erase these portions. We'll add in some file worked grooves to these front spacers. Be a little groove like that. No, too small. Let's make it bigger. Okay. I think those look pretty good. Let's connect those lines, because in real life you'd have a nice crisp line there that would show up where the file worked groove is. Might be better off hand drawing that in. Ruler is actually covering up too much. Can't see what I'm doing. Okay, clean up the ends a little bit. Erased a little bit more than we needed to up there. Okay, we've got a couple of file worked round grooves in the two larger front spacers. You know what I would probably try to do? Now you might need to make this pommel, this flat area on the pommel might need to be slightly thicker to be able to do this, but I think we might have enough room to draw it in there. Yeah, you would probably want the pommel to be slightly thicker, but I think we could probably put matching grooves on the pommel too. Yeah, the pommel would have to be thicker. Let's just quickly thicken that pommel up just a little bit. What I'm going to be doing is we're just going to give the pommel less of a dome. I'm taking away some of the dome and giving more of that flat area, because I really think it would look good to have matching grooves on there. Okay, that looks pretty good. Oops. Okay, almost got it. I think the pommel's still a little on the thin side for this. I think I would totally spend a little more time on this and thicken up the whole pommel a little bit more, but that'll give you a good idea of how that would look. Oh yeah, I'm liking that. That looks like a theme now that ties in. You've got these little grooves on the front pieces here, tying in with this back pommel piece, making it more like a complete thought. Something else we could do is maybe a little bit of file work on that middle spacer right there. That middle spacer could be made out of a different metal. It could be like silver or copper, or maybe that middle piece is blued steel and then the surrounding ones are stainless or Damascus. So many different options and things you could do. Now, I don't worry about the file work being too accurate when it comes to this. It's really hard for me to draw really, really tiny stuff accurately. I mostly just try to rough it in because it adds a little bit of flair and character to the overall sketch, even if it's done roughly. So I'm going to try to quickly draw in some rough, like vine pattern file work. Vine pattern is probably the most common one you'll see out there on little thin spacers and stuff. And it looks really good. I mean, it's a great, great pattern of file work. So for the vine pattern, I'm just going to start with a little rounded groove. I grabbed another pencil, by the way. This is a Graph Gear 500. It's got a 0.5 millimeter end on it. End. Lead. Graphite. Yeah, graphite. It's a lot smaller than these standard, like, I don't know, Sam's Club pencils. I like to grab this one when it comes to doing a little detail work. The reason I don't do this for the whole sketch is because it kind of leaves a more of a harsh line on the paper that's harder to erase. And as you can see from this sketch that we did, lots of erasing involved, moving lines around and changing things up. Okay, so I'm just going to make some little rounded grooves here, make them about 3/16 of an inch apart. This is how I do the vine pattern file work. I mean, I don't necessarily do this spacing. I always practice on a piece of spacer or something first to make sure the spacing is correct before I do it on the real thing. But this will definitely be good enough for the sketch. So just like that, we've got some little rounded grooves, and then we're going to add the same rounded grooves to the opposite side, only they're going to be staggered. Little staggered rounded grooves. And you could just do that. That's file work in itself right there. Boom, done. Got some little rounded grooves offset from each other, and that's actually a really cool look too. Lots of different cool patterns of file work you can do, ranging from really simple to really complex. Okay. Next, I'm going to try to add in the little vine, the little thorns. So underneath, here, I'll draw it bigger so you can kind of see what I'm doing here. So the pattern, that's our spacer. So we just made these. Okay. Kind of like that. The next thing we're going to do is make a little tooth. And it's going to be just underneath each one of these little rounded cuts on each side. Just like this. And then when it comes to filing these in, I mean, when I draw them in, I'll just draw it all at one time. You can make these little teeth. And then after I make these little teeth, I like to round these corners. There's like a sharp point right here where that file work meets up with this flat edge. And then there's a sharp point here. What you want to do is go in there and gently with your file or dental burr or whatever you're using, gently round that corner over, round that corner over. Remove that material there. I'll kind of draw this in. So this is all material that I'm removing. Like that. And when you round those corners off, it's really going to make the pattern look like it's flowing in like a serpentine pattern instead of this harsh, like, if you leave all those corners on. Yeah, file work. Sidetracked on file work. That's how to do the vine pattern file work. Okay, so I'm just going to try to add in these little tiny, tiny marks. They're so tiny, though, that I can barely even see what I'm doing here. Bloop, 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 bloop. And round over some of this stuff just a little bit. And it looks a little bit wonky because it's really tiny. You can draw it under a microscope, but I'm not actually worried about it that much. It's just a drawing. I'll kind of give a little bit of an idea, though, on the finished knife for how your file work's going to look. Just like that. Now we've got vine file work on our middle spacer there. There's a couple different things we could do to spice up the guard. I just had a really, really funny moment where I was about to start over my sentence as if I were videoing a YouTube video. I was about to say, there's a couple different things that you could do to spice up the guard, and then I realized I'm actually live. Because normally, if I get sidetracked, I just start the sentence over. So with the guard, there's some things we could do. We could add some gold inlay borders. You could add some engraving, some different things. There's a couple things we could do to sleek this guard up and make it look a little bit more sleek and streamlined. Earlier, I mentioned that the guard shape would be something like this. Okay, see these flat areas right here? It looks something like this, and then the tips of the guard would curve in like that. Well, one really cool upgrade that I've done to this version of the guard is to change up these flat areas. Okay, so what you do is you leave this part alone, this center part. You leave these tips where they are right here, but you come in and shape it something like this. So that's one way you can spice it up. Can't really draw that on the sketch because we're just looking at it 2D from the side. But I just wanted to point that out. You can leave it flat like that. I do that very often. A lot of times I'll have a little gold inlay or something on there to spice it up. But you can also come in here, grind away all that material, and kind of give it this really cool curved shape on the side, which adds a lot to the knife. It adds a lot of 3D curvy variety happening right there. Something else we can do, and I did this recently on a dagger, the Serenity dagger. Sometimes these guards have a tendency of looking a little chunky. You can come in like right here, grind away some material, thin that down a little bit, change these lines slightly, and I think you can really thin up the guard and make it look pretty cool. Trying to illustrate what I'm talking about here. That wasn't drawn very well, but that's kind of gives you the idea what I was talking about. Might need to thin this down ever so slightly if you do that. You can come in there, grind or file this away and make it slimmer there and then kind of taper out. I think for this Bowie though, I want to leave that like it was, but I just wanted to kind of throw that other option out there as something you could do. As far as different things, it's really down to your imagination. Sometimes adding a little groove or some kind of cut in to a shape that you've already done many times can really spice it up, make it seem fresh and new, add some excitement in there. And for me, I've done things like adding this in. I've added that little flare I was talking about there, and they're kind of like little building blocks that build on each other one after another. Started with this base guard, add a cool tip shape to it, add this little shape to it, add this little shaping thing I just showed you right here to it, maybe shape up the way it meets to the guard, have it, or meets up to the blade, have it curve forward into a point instead of it just being flat. All sorts of little building blocks that don't necessarily all come at once. You can be inspired from different things and kind of have different things build off of each other and have it develop over time into something that becomes more and more unique and more unique to your style. I think for this guard, I think I just want to add some gold inlay. I think some gold inlay would look really good. Just some clean gold inlay outlining the borders would be a nice embellishment. We'll do a thin gold wire. And if you want to learn exactly how I do my gold inlay, definitely check out learnknifemaking.com. We've got multiple courses over there, and in a couple of them, I do gold inlay and show you exactly how I do it. It's not that complicated or scary. It's actually relatively simple and easy to get into, especially when we're talking about doing nice, clean gold inlay borders. For a long time, I was really scared to even get into it, but it's not anything to be scared of. You basically you just make a groove in the metal, you dovetail it out, smash some gold in there, sand it all flush, and it looks beautiful. I show you all the tips and techniques that I've picked up and used over the years. Make it really simple. So there's a nice little border there. Add one to this real quick. Trying to just stay a consistent, trying to stay consistently the same distance from the edge of the guard, kind of difficult. When I'm doing this on an actual guard, I use my dividers, and that makes it really easy. Okay, we got a little gold there. Let me thicken that line up just a little bit. Spice this up. Add one down here, and then the guard, I believe, will be done. Something you might want to do, the guard did look a little bit big, so you might want to make it a little bit smaller, make everything a tiny bit thinner. I think having this gold inlay on it would help it not look so big. But if you weren't going to do the gold inlay, then maybe make everything, just scale it down a tiny bit as far as the thickness goes. It's not too big. I was just saying it's maybe a little bit on the wider side. I think the gold inlay or some embellishment or something somewhere on it, though, would definitely help alleviate that a little bit. Okay, we've got some really rough gold inlay. I promise if you watch the courses, I'll show you how to do the gold inlay, and it'll look much cleaner than the gold inlay that I'm drawing right now. Won't look nearly as scribbly. That's kind of an idea how that would look with some clean and simple gold outlines bordering the top and bottom quillion and that kind of center area. Another thing that's really fun that you can do, you can carve out that entire center area and then take small gold wires and just smash them all together in the middle and completely fill out that middle area, and it'll look like just like a big plate of gold set right in the middle. I did that on my Mastersmith test dagger, and it was really cool. And I've done that a few other times, and it's so cool how you can actually just take gold and smash it, and take the wires and put them next to each other and smash them together, and it becomes like one solid looking plate, even though they're multiple individual wires. I think that pretty much does it for the embellishment on this knife. I'm very happy with this overall. This is totally a Bowie that I definitely have to make in the future. I love the guard. It's really dramatic, and I think it goes really well with this kind of Sheffield style clip and the handle shape we've got going on and stuff here too. I think this Bowie would look fantastic if it were actually created and turned into a real knife. I would probably end up doing like a big old Damascus blade, maybe mosaic. I love mosaic. There's so much variety and everything you can do with it. And then for the guard, I would probably go like stainless steel or gun-blued steel or something like that, and then maybe have a little silver or copper spacer or something right there. I think this would be an absolute beautiful Bowie knife. If you want to see in detail how I sketch 4 more knives from start to finish, clear and concise, way more so than the live stream where Josh is actually able to cut out all the ums and ahs and me trying to think of what to do and everything, then check out learnsketchmaking.com. I'm going to show you exactly how I go from start to finish, how I'm even inspired to draw a certain knife. And we'll go through the process of drawing a EDC, a takedown dagger, yeah, an EDC. I have pictures of them all right here. Learnsketchmaking.com. Here's the EDC. Go through the process of drawing all this. A Western style chef's knife. We even make a cardboard cutout of this and make sure that it's going to perform properly and make some adjustments and stuff. The first one I drew was not going to perform properly. I show you what I'm looking for in a chef's knife to get it to perform, to get the right curve through here, to get enough knuckle clearance and everything. Go through a recurve fighter. This is a big one with a 12-inch blade. Lots of curves on here. And then also how to create a Mastersmith style Quillian dagger. I drew this with all the ABS kind of specs in mind, with a 10-inch blade. We got a Quillian guard, fluted handle that would have twisted wire and stuff in it. So check those out. Links in the description for learnsketchmaking.com. If you get Learn Sketchmaking, you're also going to get all of our other courses. We have a bunch of them: the Takedown Bowie, the Beginner Bladesmith, the Mosaic Damascus Fighter, the Catalyst Dagger, the Enigma Folder, the Damascene Hunter, and more. You're going to get access to all of those courses. And with each one of those courses, I take you from the beginning to the very end of the build in the shop, right alongside with me, just like you're there one-on-one. And I teach you exactly how I make every aspect of those knives. Yeah, the link's in the description for that. Definitely check it out. You don't want to miss out on this. Thanks so much for watching this live stream and checking out how I would go about sketching a kind of classic Kyle Royer Western-y style Damascus Bowie. I guess it doesn't have to be Damascus, but yeah. Thanks for checking it out, following along and watching this sketch. That's pretty much my process for creating sketches. I think they're fundamental to have when it comes to creating a piece that you're going to spend a lot of time on. It's a lot of fun to just go out and make a knife without a sketch too. But when I'm spending tons and tons of time, weeks and months on a piece, then I want to have a good solid foundation. And that's pretty much my process for how to come up with one. So I will see you in the next live stream. May the forge be with you. Bye-bye.